Now, the brand new album, it's called 10,000 Volts. It's out on February 23rd. We've got our first taste of the record with the release of the title track, the self-titled track, 10,000 Volts. We'll get to that soon. But first of all, tell us about working with Steve Brown, because I heard you say that you'd shied away from collaborations in the past, finding it easier to work alone. So how did this one come about? How did you team up with Steve for this?
Well, my fiancée, Laura, has known Steve since she was in her early 20s, and I've known Steve only on a casual basis for years. And, I tried co-writing with a couple of other friends of mine, my old guitar player, Derek, and I was working with Pepe Castro from the Blues Magoos, which is an old band which you may or may not have heard of. And it was going slow. So finally, Laura talked me into giving Steve a call. We got together and magic happened. I can't explain it. I can't actually verbalize it. All I can tell you is when we got together, sparks flew, and we just kept rattling out these songs one after another.
So how did it work between you then? I mean, in terms of the ideas, did you both come up with them and sit down together and it all just kind of mixed together and the best stuff kind of came from that?
Well, I mean, the great thing about Steve is that he's been engineering Pro Tools for 30 years. So as far as I'm concerned, when I'm recording, the less people in the studio, the better. Too many chefs spoil the stew. So for 90% of the record, it was just me and Steve in the studio alone. And we were bouncing ideas off each other. He'd bring me a song idea. I'd write a bridge. I'd rewrite the lyrics, 75 or 80% of them. And I put down a solo and a lead vocal, and we'd have a song.
And I've heard you say that some of the songs came together really quickly. In a week, you did 2, 3, 4 sometimes. So was it as magical as that? Did it all happen so quickly?
I write lyrics very quickly. And, I've spoken to several musicians that I know, and they said, they struggle with writing lyrics. I've never had a problem writing lyrics. And, I've never been to I never went to college. I never took any creative writing courses or poetry courses. And I don't know, it just comes natural to me. Sometimes I actually feel like the words are being beamed into my head by, I don't know who, aliens or whoever.
Whatever works.
I can write a song if the music is set. I can write lyrics for a song in 45 minutes.
Wow. Incredible stuff. And not jumping too far ahead, but is it something you could see yourself doing again, working with Steve in the future?
Oh, yeah. We've already planned on working together on my next project, which is going to be Origins Volume 3. And right now we've been working on getting special guest stars to be showcased on that record to make it more special. But that we're talking about, mid to late 2025.
A little while to go with that. So go back to 10,000 Volts then. I mean, you've said it's your best album since the solo record in 78. So many people talking about it. I think that the first video on YouTube is nearing 1 million views as well for the official video, that is. So why do you think it all came together with you and Steve, and this one just worked so well?
I don't have an answer for you. All I can tell you is I've written with a lot of different people. I've written with Paul Stanley. I don't think I've ever written a song with Gene, but I've written with Paul. I rewrote some songs with Peter in the past, and I've written with several other people. Chip Racklin we co-wrote Rock Soldiers. And I don't know if you're aware of the fact that his brother is John Voight, the actor.
Okay.
And which makes him Angelina Jolie's uncle. But I never had a chance to meet her. But we wrote, and his biggest hit was Wild Thing and Angel of the Morning. But, he's still doing it. I haven't seen him in years, but, people that know him told me that, he's still writing and working and producing. And ironically, last Monday, Eddie Kramer, the guy who produced my 78 solo album, as well as the Live 1 and 2, and a couple of other records like Rock and Roll Over, he contacted me, and out of the blue, I haven't spoken to Eddie in probably 10 years. And it was a lot of, we reminisced and discussed this and that. People have been trying to get a hold of him because they want to interview him about my relationship with him over the years. And, people still cite my 78 solo album as being one of my, greatest achievements. Plus, the hit single New York Groove was the biggest hit single that any of the Kiss members have ever gotten as a solo artist. So, I mean, I've learned so much from Eddie Kramer, his miking techniques, his production skills. He taught me how to use compressors and limiters and mixing consoles, EQ. He made me understand. You walk into a recording studio and you see this gigantic board, and it's very intimidating.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the buttons do. You're like, fucked. What Eddie told me that really kind of made it seem manageable was that he said, Ace, all you have to do is memorize one strip, because all the other strips do exactly the same thing. They're just different tracks. So he explained to me what everything did on one strip. And once I got that, I pretty much understood the way the console worked, except for, some of the other faders, the master fader and, certain sends, auxiliary sends and so on and so forth. And then, we started attacking the racks of outboard gear, compressors, limiters, digital delays. And, but, with Eddie in there, when I worked with Eddie, they really didn't have great digital delays and reverbs like they have today. So we used to strive to get natural ambience, by miking amplifiers and drums close and miking them, from a distance. And then we blend the sound together. When we were recording my solo album at the Colgate Mansion in Sharon, Connecticut in 1978, we had Anton Fig set up in the middle of the foyer, and there were staircases that went up, and he had microphones on the second floor aiming down at the drums to pick up the ambience. We kind of got that John Bonham sound in some cases. And so, I mean, me and Eddie have been very, very close. And he wants me to fly to London this week, at the end of the week, and be in some movie that's being shot at Abbey Road Studio. I don't know if I can make it because my schedule is so filled up, but I'm going to try.
That sounds absolutely fascinating. And just touching on the 78 record, as we said, we've got a few questions from listeners. We've got one from Ted Hogan that says, your solo record, obviously 78 was the biggest selling of the four. What do you remember of that time and when the idea was first floated to do the solo records? And how did it feel knowing that yours was the best of the lot?
Well, I didn't know it was going to turn out the best. It just so happened that me and Eddie and Anton put a lot of love into that record. I had just met Anton Fig at the beginning of that project. I auditioned him, and I wasn't even sure who was going to play drums on the record. And a good friend of mine that I went to high school with called me up one day and said, you should try out this drummer, Anton Fig. And then 2 days later, Eddie Kramer called me. He said, you should listen to this drummer, Anton Fig. So I thought it was kismet. I thought, something's going on. Anyway, I got Anton to the studio, and we hit it off right away. And we jammed for half an hour. And I just said to Anton, you're the guy. And, since that day, he's worked with me on, dozens of records, not dozens, probably, 8 or 9 records.
You've got him back involved in this one. It's out at the end of February. Just touching on a couple of the tracks then. One of them I really enjoyed was Blinded. Blinded by Science, Blinded by Fear, Zeros and Ones have got us by the balls. Obviously, it's a song about technology. So give us a bit of the story behind that song.
I remember calling Steve after we were about halfway through the record, and almost all the songs are about girls. And that's a trap that most rock musicians fall into. Yes. When they start writing a song. It usually ends up being about a chick, So I had recently been reading some articles on artificial intelligence, and a lot of scientists and heads of CEOs of corporations. They're saying, there's a good chance in 5 or 10 years, if we don't regulate artificial intelligence, it might take us out. So because that was on my mind, I said to Steve, why don't we write a song about artificial intelligence? And even though I don't use the term in the song, if you listen to the lyrics, you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of AI and all that sort of stuff, did you use it on this record, or what's your thoughts on it in general?
Well, I kind of shy away from artificial intelligence. I'm old school. I still plug into old Vox, Marshall, Fender amps. I put them in an ISO booth, and I put the amp in the control room. And, just like, if you look over here, you see there's Marshall in the box. And, the speakers are in the other room, which is ISO, which is completely soundproof. And then we bring up this, mic up the speakers, bring the sound, into all my preamps. And then we get it into Pro Tools. And that's how I record guitar solos and rhythm tracks. Acoustic tracks I'll just do in here with a microphone and an acoustic guitar. I usually do my vocals right over there.
Ah, okay.
You can see the microphone. And me and Steve will both wear headphones and turn the speakers off so they don't bleed into the mic.
Excellent. And there's some impressive looking guitars all around the walls there. I mean, what's your favorite of the ones you've got hanging up around you?
My who?
Your favorite guitar that you've got hanging up around you? Oh.
Well, that blue one is one of my faves. I bought that about a year ago. Obviously, a couple of my Gibson 59 copies I love. I use on stage. And my Black Beauty triple pickup with cream pickups, that's upstairs in the bedroom. I was rehearsing with that this morning because I'm shooting the video Walking on the Moon Friday. So
stuff indeed. Now, in terms of the record then, of course, you're the spaceman, and there's a theme followed throughout some of the song titles in the record as well. Walking on the Moon, as you just mentioned, Up in the Sky, Stratosphere, Cosmic Heart. Was that a purposeful decision of yours and Steve's?
Well, there's song titles that just came up, Cherry Medicine was a song that we put together about halfway through the record. And I remember I had rough mixes, and, my fiance still has like tons of girlfriends from she knows all the girlfriends she knew when she was in high school. So there's always girls over here. And, she has a 20-year-old daughter, and so they're always coming down to visit when they're here. And, I'd play them 3 or 4 rough mixes, halfway through the album. And they always said Cherry Medicine should be the first single. But the record company felt that, we should use the title track to kick off the first single. And we're doing Walking on the Moon, which originally was going to be the title track of the album. But I scratched the cover because I thought it was a little too cliched. And 10,000 volts seemed to be a little more exciting, and I liked the artwork that the artist came up with. And so we decided to release 10,000 volts first, Walking on the Moon second, and actually we're releasing Cherry Medicine the same day the album is being released, February 23rd.
So there we go. In terms of the record itself, as we said, February 23rd is when it's out. You can pre-order it now, get online and do the usual stuff. You can get various copies and things like that. But in terms of the release date itself, Mac the Wolf was in touch and he said it's almost 50 years to the day since the release of the original Kiss record, the debut Kiss record. So was that planned or was it coincidence? And looking back now, what's your feelings on that debut Kiss record?
I don't pay attention to dates very much, but I am into numerology. I have simian palms. Do you know what that is?
I have no idea.
Okay, if you look at my palms, you see I have the line goes straight across.
Yep.
On both palms. If you look at your palms, there's probably two lines that split.
Yep.
Yeah. 90% of the people on the planet have those kind of lines on their hands, but this is a trait that not that many people have. I mean, Tony Blair has them. He used to be the Prime Minister of England, I think. A lot of celebrities have it. It's supposed to mean it mean you have maybe a little higher intelligence or you're more of a special person. I've always felt I was special. I have 163 IQ, and I never took a guitar lesson. But what helped me with music was I grew up in a musical family. My mother and father played piano. My brother and sister played piano and acoustic guitar. And I was the youngest of three children. And so I just kind of got it by osmosis.
And in terms then, just to answer Mac's question, what's your thoughts looking back 50 years on that debut Kiss record then?
Well, it's been a roller coaster ride, I joined Kiss in 72, 73, left in 82. Then I rejoined for the reunion tour in 95, 96. And then I quit again in around 2001, 2002. And, what the success of my solo album in 1978, after I got back together with the guys, I kind of realized I kind of saw the writing on the wall that I realized that I was more creative away from Paul, Gene, and Peter than I was when I was around them. We were great live, and four guys from four different backgrounds, but magic happened when we performed. Eventually we fell into those pitfalls and traps. Once we became famous, I overindulged in drugs and alcohols, and so did Peter. For some reason, Paul and Gene, I don't think they ever did cocaine, but I remember, when I was going to Studio 54, everybody did cocaine. But it seems over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a trend in Hollywood and in the music business to get sober. And I've been sober now 17 years, and it's made the world of difference for me. I'm just able to concentrate more. I'm more creative. I'm healthier. I dropped 45 pounds in the last year and a half. I'm down to 175. And I feel great. My fiance is also a personal trainer, besides being a school teacher and a painter. So she pretty much stopped teaching school, and she's been concentrating on her paintings. And she helps me work out. Right now she's in the gym, and I'm home alone. The kids are in school, and I'm loving it. Yeah. This is kind of like my man cave.
I love your man cave. It's absolutely fantastic. Right, another question for you I've got from Stingy Lizard. There's some interesting names that people use on YouTube anyway. He says, thanks for the great show in Austin, Texas last summer. Where did you round up your current band members from? All hella musicians.
Well, Gene invited me to go to Australia with him in 2018, and he had a support band. And the support band ended up becoming my band because Gene was using them to do to promote his vault experience. Remember when he was selling those safes?
Yep.
And so he was also supposed to go to Japan. And I had 12 shows booked in Japan right after Australia, because most people like get for us, Australia's on the other side of the world. So, if you get to Australia, you go due north, you hit Japan. So most artists usually go to Japan if they go to Australia. Anyway, Gene was supposed to perform in Australia, and something happened and he went back to the States. He canceled. But I asked him if I could borrow his band, and he said, sure, no problem, because he was probably gearing up for a new Kiss tour. And after working with them in Japan and Australia, once we got back to the States, I realized I wanted to keep them as my live band, touring band. And Gene had no problem with that, and I thanked him for it. And, most of the guys are from Nashville. And last year, I rehired my old drummer, Scott Coogan, who was with me from 2007 till about 2000. And when did I let him go? We parted company about 5 years ago when I hired Gene's band. But recently, I decided to get Steve back because for a while he had relapsed and was drinking too much. And, now that I'm sober, I don't allow alcohol in the dressing room or any drugs around me. So, but once I found out Scotty, who was a dear friend of mine, got sober and he had 2 years under his belt, I decided to hire him back. So it's me, Scotty, and the two guys from Nashville. Sounds great.
Indeed. Well done. I've got a question here from Graham Walden, just talking about support bands. He says, with Kiss, you had some amazing support bands tour with you. Blue Oyster Cult, Judas Priest, Sammy Hagar, to name but a few. Who were your favorite bands to tour with? And were there any bands that you didn't get along with?
I get along with everybody 95% of the time. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I'm very gregarious. I'm friendly. I'm open. And, Paul and Gene, when they were on the road, they were like, they never really hung out with anybody in the crew or, we had a huge crew.
Yeah.
With all those stages and special effects, but I was a regular kind of guy. I didn't care if you were, driving a tractor trailer truck or if you were tuning guitars. I used to play poker with the truck drivers and usually win. There's an old saying, it's probably not a good idea to play cards with a guy named Ace. Yeah, that's what was going down then. And today, I don't really play poker that much anymore because I don't have the time. And was that the question? I always go.
No, not at all. He was just asking who your favorite bands to tour with.
Oh, I really enjoyed touring with Rush. We became really close. And after the shows, we used to hang out together in my room or in Peter's room, whoever had the bigger suite. And sometimes Alex Lifeson from Rush would put a paper bag over his head and draw a face on it and smoke a joint out of it and tell jokes. Peter used to get up and he invented this character called Dr. Rosenblum, and he'd act like this really sick, demented doctor, and he'd put on glasses and put on a white shirt and act like a complete imbecile, but we were drinking beer and smoking pot, and we were rolling around on the floor laughing, you know. So, I mean, that's what it was all about. After the show, we unwind. You want to unwind so you can go to sleep, because when you get off the stage, that adrenaline is still pumping. So you got to try to figure out ways you can relax and end up falling asleep. So that's what we did with Rush. Another group that I really enjoyed performing with, I'm really good friends with, is Cheap Trick.
Yes.
And it was such a tragedy when Neil Peart passed away, because we were close and we used to hang out back after the shows as well. I mean, I remember opening up for Ozzy a couple of times, but that was, what the biggest problem for us in the 70s was? Bands didn't want us to open for them because we're a tough act to follow. We got all these bombs and amplifiers and you name it, we got it. And nobody wanted to follow us. So we had problems, Luckily, with the success of the live album, that our first live record, we ended up headlining everywhere after that. So it was just a matter of finding groups to open up for us. Bob Seger opened up for a tour for us. I don't know what he's doing these days, but it was a lot of fun, I was young, I was crazy. There was a lot of girls everywhere, and no shortage of that. And of course, alcohol and drugs. So
yeah, that was the days. That was the rock stars.
Going to Australia in 1980 was like unbelievable. We were met by, thousands of kids at the airport. It was kind of like the Beatles coming to America. Same thing in Japan. When we landed in Japan, there was 5,000 kids waiting for us in Tokyo. I never realized, that we had such an impact on other countries. And, finally, towards the end of the 70s, I realized I was an international superstar, and that stuck with me through my whole life.
And do you have any crazy stories about your time, maybe in Australia or Japan? I remember speaking to Jackie Fox from the Runaways, and she said that they were mobbed in Japan and they ended up running through department stores and restaurant kitchens to get away from people. Do you have any memories like that?
I'll tell you a funny story. We were in Japan, and there was this famous toy store in Tokyo, and I forget the name of the store, but all I can tell you is, we were there with our bodyguards. I always was into gadgets. I bought like radio-controlled helicopters, walkie-talkies, microscopes, anything that was, I wanted to have everything. I bought a whole set of Nikon cameras with all the different lenses, the telescopic lens, the micro lens, and it all fit into a neatly contained package that you could carry it with. But while we were in this toy store, we got attacked by these Japanese girls all dressed up in Nazi uniforms.
What?
So that was pretty nutty. And Australia was a joy. I mean, I love Australia. The people are beautiful. The people are fun, fun-loving people, easy to get along with. I mean, the promoter of the tour, he was a maniac. We ended up buying out all the Dom Perignon champagne in by the end of the 1980 Australian tour. They had to ship in more champagne from, I don't know where they got it from, but we drank, he was ordering cases and cases of Dom Perignon. And at that point in time, I was doing a lot of champagne and cocaine, and it was was a roller coaster ride. You know, he kept we kept taking cruises in Sydney Harbor, you know, where that famous bridge is, and he'd fill the boat up with models, fashion models, and who knows, and groupies and whatever. And I had one of the best times in my life. That first tour we did in Australia, it was really special, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Incredible stuff. I've got a question here from Barton Percival, who says, "Hi Ace, do you remember the night you played at Cow Palace in San Francisco on the Love Gun tour, August 16th, 1977? It was the night Elvis Presley passed away, and you guys dedicated Rock and Roll All Night to Elvis. Cheap Trick opened the show. What's your memories of that and hearing that Elvis had passed away?"
Well, I was very saddened by losing the king, because Elvis was the king. But if my memory serves me correctly, that afternoon I had like a cold and a sore throat, and I remember Bill O'Coin, my manager, getting me an acupuncturist to come to my room and give me acupuncture. I'd never had it before, and the guy was a little of a space cadet, and he was putting all these needles in me, and then he attached them to electrodes and was, you know, pumping electricity into the needles. And then he like opened up the drapes. He goes, "There's too many negative ions in this room. We need some sunlight," you know, because I always kept it dark. And he started cracking my back. And while he was doing that, he was a big guy. He had forgotten to take one of the needles out, you know, right here in my throat. And he was pushing the needle in while he was trying to crack my back. And, you know, blood started coming down, you know. I mean, it wasn't anything major, but it was just nuts, you know, the fact that he left the needle in. And what else happened there? I remember the Cow Palace. Yeah, that was a crazy place because they used to have rodeos there, and there was a lot of dirt, and they cover it up, I think, for concerts. I'm not exactly, I don't remember exactly what the floor was like. You know, when they had rock concerts, maybe they covered it up with plywood or something. But it was a fun place to play. The sound wasn't that great because it was a huge place, and, you know, the sound would kind of get lost, and there'd be a lot of reflections, and it wasn't acoustically one of the better places to play, but it was a fun place to play. And I remember selling it out, and I remember doing that tribute for Elvis.
I've got another question here from JC Holland. He says, when you left Kiss, did you have any offers to join other bands that you turned down?
No, I didn't have any other offers. My plans were to start my own band, and that ended up being Frehs Comet. And that first Frehs Comet album went gold, and did very well. But, you know, after a couple of those records, you know, I was living in Manhattan. I had separated from my wife, and I was living on the 43rd floor of a high rise on the west side of Manhattan. And when I was in Florida, I had met this fashion model because we were staying at this hotel, and these 4 fashion models were doing a fashion shoot by the pool. So I'm sitting there with Todd Howarth, you know, my other guitar player, and I said, we got to invite these chicks to the show. So we gave them tickets. All 4 of them ended up coming to the concert, and we had a great time. They came back to the hotel. I ended up with a beautiful blonde. She took me to her room, and it was magical. And then, ironically, I said to her, "Where do you live?" She goes, "I live on 67th Street in New York City." I go, where? She goes, a half a block from Central Park. I go, well, I live 4 blocks from Central Park on 67th Street. So in my mind, I said, this must be, serendipity. Maybe I'm meant to be with this chick, even though she was only 18 years old and I was 37. So we dated for a couple of weeks, and then I just said to her, look, why don't you just move in with me? And she moved in with me for about 9 months. And unfortunately, I would have to leave to go on tour. And I trusted her in the apartment alone. But when I got back, I heard from friends, I heard that she was dabbling with heroin.
Okay.
So she ended up, getting involved with the wrong kind of people. So, by the end of that year, I asked her, I broke up with her, and for a while, she didn't know what to do. She was only 18, 19. So I put her up in a hotel for a couple of months, and then eventually she ended up going back to Texas, where she was from, Austin, Texas. And she married her high school sweetheart and had a child.
All worked out okay in the end then. You mentioned Frehs Comet there. I've got a question here from MCBK. He says, Rock Soldiers is one of my favorite songs. The line, if the devil wants to play his card game now, he's going to have to play without an ace in his deck. He says it's one of the best delivered lines in rock. Given that song was about your own personal troubles, was it a tough song to write and work on?
That was, like I said earlier in our conversation, I wrote that song with Chip Taylor.
Yeah.
And originally, it was going to be a strictly anti-drug song, and the chorus was originally, we were just going to say, "Just say no," and I forget what the other lyrics were in the chorus, but it was good, but I thought we could do better with it, and I'm sitting in the recording studio at North Lake Studios in North White Plains, and I lived about an hour from there. And I'm sitting in the studio, and Chip comes walking in, and I'm doing a guitar solo on Rock Soldiers, and Chip starts going, "Rock soldiers come, rock soldiers go." So he came up with that just on the spur of the moment. And honestly, the song wasn't called Rock Soldiers at the time. Now that I think about it, it was called Just Say No. So we worked up that chorus, and it turned out great. And then we kind of rewrote the song a little to be less of a anti-drug song and more of just a fan song.
Fantastic stuff. I've got a question here from Timothy Vaughan. He wants to know about your thoughts on the Kiss biopic. He says, are you involved with it?
Involved in what?
The Kiss biopic.
Oh, Kiss.
The biopic. I think there's supposed to be a movie coming out this year about the early days of the band.
I was offered to be in a movie, but I turned it down. They didn't want to pay me enough money, and they didn't want to give me, what's the word? They didn't want to give me approval of the footage they were going to shoot of me. So I passed on it, because, if you're going to do a biopic about your own life, you want to be able to have approval of your own footage, and they didn't want to give that to me. So I passed on that. I mean, is that still coming out?
No news. No news for me anyway.
Come out already? I thought it came out already.
Oh, well, there you go. That's just a question.
I think they used the old footage of me, which there's plenty of old footage of me on stage and off stage and some silly interviews.
Yeah.
And, but I didn't do any new stuff, current interviews. I didn't want to be involved in the project. I wasn't in the band anymore. I had already, been successful as a solo artist, so I declined.
Absolutely. And one last question then, Ace. I've got something from a guy called Rockin' Experience. He says he saw something on celebrity ghost stories and wanted to ask if you've had any other ghostly experiences since the last haunted house you lived in.
Believe it or not, no. You know, when I met Laura 5 years ago, and she was living in a smaller home in the town right next door to Sparta, New Jersey. She was living in Lafayette in a 2,500 square foot home, and that place wasn't haunted. And then we were looking. You know, I came into some money, and we were looking in the real estate pages, and we found the house we're in now, which is about 8,000 square feet, 5 acres with a 650-foot driveway, and we're really hidden. We live in a development of about 45 homes, but ours is up 1,000 feet and in the back. So we have complete privacy. I mean, we could walk around naked in our backyard and no one would see us. But, you know,
Don't do that today. There's too much snow. You'll get cold.
You know, but we have deer and bears coming out of the woods. You know, it's kind of cool, though. You know, we haven't had any incidents. You know, we have a good dog that has a loud bark, so that helps.
Good stuff. Well, Ace, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I recommend everyone go out there and get 10,000 volts. Pre-order it now. It comes out February 23rd. And just one last plug for it, Ace. Tell us why everyone should go out and order their copy now.
Well, I think it's one of the best albums I ever did. I mean, I think it's probably as good as my solo album in 1978, which everybody seems to think is my best album to date. But I think this new album is equally as good as my 1978 solo album, and I think there's more than one hit single on the album. So if I was a Kiss fan or an Ace Frehley fan, I'd go out and buy it immediately when it's released on February 23rd, because you're in for a treat.
Can't say it any better. Ace, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck for the future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the future. I'm doing a cruise,
Yes.
Monsters of Rock, the first week in March, and a lot of good things are going to happen this year.
Fantastic stuff. Well, you look after yourself and take care.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
Okay.